Hi, once again, I am Joshua Shale, and I am a fractional COO with GCE Strategic Consulting. And thank you for attending part 3 of 4 on our talk about accountability. Today, we're going to talk about accountability and organizational management. So that is a little bit about organizations and how we structure them and how there are going to be different areas. We're going to have different accountabilities and how we want to create our accountabilities around our organization for us to achieve our goals. So why don't we jump in with some of the overview. We're going to start with just taking a look at some basic organization and some basic organizations, plural, and their structures, just so we can get that organizational management piece in place. Then we'll talk about the organization and the measures that they're going to want to have. And really what we're going to see is the further down the org chart, the more detailed the measures are, the higher up the org chart, the broader the measures are. And we'll get into that and talk about some examples and dive into that a little bit more effectively. And then one of the last topics before we get to homework is how do we use measures to resolve problems in the organization? So often, as business leaders, we can see that there is a problem, and we see it at the measures at a high level. But how do we go deeper into the organization? How do we use those measures to truly diagnose and understand what the problem is? And then how do we use measures to address it, fix it, and move on so that we can continue to go forward? So with that, we're going to start taking a look at an organization. But before we jump into that too much, everybody's seen an org chart, and everybody's familiar with them. They are the modern org chart is sort of a remnant from the U.S. Army, and where it's a very hierarchical way of looking at things. There are other business practices that try to be a bit more evolved about this, but for our discussion's sake, an org chart is a perfect thing to look at because it has delineations of a hierarchy. It has delineations of, remember, we were talking about authority and responsibility. You'll see that in different levels, there's different amounts of authority and responsibility. So why don't we start by taking a look at the simplest of org charts? And that's this one here. The other people's org charts may differ, but let's just put it in where there is a chief executive officer. That is the one that has it's at the top of the organization. They're the ones who are not only running the company itself, but they're having that relationship with the market at large, with really important people in the industry, with important customers, with things out there. So a CEO is as much looking out of the organization as they are looking into the organization, which is why we'd like to have, in this chart, we're calling it the president. And the president is the one that is looking throughout the organization itself, freeing that CEO up to be out in the marketplace, who's able to manage some of those relationships that are external to the organization. Now, in this one, we're going to split the three main functions of the business into revenue, operations, and finance. Of course, this isn't going to fit for all organizations. Some may have an R&D function, may be very high up in this area, a compliance, a security. But for our example here, we're going to keep it to revenue, operations, and finance. So let's break down what that really means. Revenue, yes, it sounds obvious, but it's not only what is the revenue we get, but it's how do we go about doing that? What are the machines for doing that? What is and that will involve customer and client experience. That could involve marketing. It could involve all the facets underneath marketing, be it social, be it outreach, be it nurturing, things of that nature. It's also going to involve the things which allow that person who oversees revenue to actually identify, close, and maintain revenue producing relationships. So that is a fairly wide area. In operations, it's the blocking and tackling of running the business. I won't belabor that. Then over in this model of finance finance is really the counterpart to revenue and operations in this model, where they are saying, look, we have certain amounts of resource which is coming from our revenue. We have a certain amount of resources that we get from our operations. How do we optimize that for attaining our goals? So if you look at from this level, these are all very strategic positions. All of these positions have high degrees of responsibility and high degrees of authority. So this is the classic one. So Ken, I know that you've seen lots of organizations, and we always want to start taking a look at that senior leadership block. Have you seen, is this typical of what you see, or have you seen where there are other very distinct functions that are at that very high senior leadership?
I think this makes up the core, to be quite honest. And I something I actually was just to even highlight for applicability. I was just on a podcast recently, and I was quoting that 99% of all companies out there are 100 employees or less in the United States. And believe it or not, 89% of all companies are 20 or less, right? So companies get really small really quick. And I think we have this vision that, all these giant IBMs, Oracles, KPMG, and all that out there. And that's not the case. But if you look at the major functionality, revenue, what it takes to operate your business, and then finance, which generally IT or HR falls under, I think this is a very good snapshot of that.
Yeah. So as I had defined the CEO as being somebody who has who sits and looks down over that organization, but also is looking externally and out into the marketplace itself. That makes that president role pretty interesting, because they are far more focused on the organization itself and all of the areas underneath them. So what are your thoughts, Ken, or your experience on is the president able to have a good insight into revenue, operations, and finance with simple sets of measures or accountabilities that they're looking at on a daily or weekly basis?
Let me see if I understand your question. So as the president, GM, CO, whatever you call it, that box there.
Yeah.
Your question is, if they had just a few measurables, would that give them the correct insights they need to run the company across revenue, operations, and finance? Is that accurate?
Yeah, or at least to see like all needles are in green, or hey, we have a problem. Revenue person, you have an issue in your shop. You need to go and start looking through it. But I mean,
yeah, absolutely. So, and I can also kind of envision what some of those indicators are from across the different disciplines as well. So, not sure if you're going to get into that or not, but yes, I see that.
Yeah, well, that's the exact point I'm making about the real importance of measures and real importance about these accountabilities, because as they go from top down or bottom up, we can always, when we're in our organizations and we're looking at the areas that are reporting up to us, right, we can truly use these to get very, very quickly a snapshot of the health of the organization that's around us. Right. And so that's why these measures are so important. So I mean, let's look at that a little bit. Having those accountabilities at that senior level, it's really about those big picture numbers. It's getting into too much detail, getting into a lot of those the sort of the minutia of the numbers. We begin to break that responsibility authority, because we're taking up too much responsibility at too high a level, and not giving the people underneath who actually have to do this the authority to be able to hit their measures. So at the senior leadership level, it's very important. High level numbers, big picture numbers. That allows us to understand how the organization is running and its overall health. And to that end, lots and lots of numbers is not better. Yep. So there are a few reasons for that. One is the boil the frog situation. If you have a whole lot of numbers week in and week out, you get the eye glaze, you begin not to pay attention to them as much. Whereas if you have a simple, discrete set of numbers, you're going to look at them, you're going to understand them, you're really going to pay attention to them. So it is an art to really understand the numbers at a high level that are going to really help you to know how revenue is doing, how operations is doing, how finance is doing, and then how the organizations underneath them, how they are doing, just by looking at a certain set of numbers. It really, again, helps again with that balance of authority and responsibility.
Yep.
So a great way to think about it is this: if you're senior leadership and you're going to be somewhere in the South Pacific with no internet, and all you get is a carrier pigeon who comes in and drops you a report once a week, what are the numbers that you would want to know to let you know that the organization is in a good place? Think about your numbers in that way. So, you know, if you're the president and you're looking at the revenue space, I'm not going to worry about number of dials done or number of cold emails sent out last week. It's just not that relevant. It's what are those numbers that if you were in Bora Bora, you would really want. So let's talk a little bit about two of these pitfalls. What happens if we have too many measures? What happens if we have the wrong measures? Like where does that really, like we know that that's not the right thing, but how does it manifest itself in being, uh-oh, we've made some mistakes?
Yeah. So so I mean both are problematic. So too many, I find that, you know, the team doesn't understand what the right focus is, right? Number one. Number two, it's generally a red flag for me, and helps identify that, you know, we're trying to micromanage the team, right? Because we want to know everything. And I find that sometimes this happens when companies are small and begin to grow and everything, and they want to keep a pulse on everything. So rely on knowing everything and and trying to do that, which is, you know, becomes micromanagement, rather than just trusting and empowering people to, you know, to execute, right? And then I think your next question was what, having the wrong measurements?
Yeah, I'm just talking about pitfalls and where it goes south.
Yes, I mean, obviously having the wrong measurements. I mean, a lot of times I see, like, when I go into a company, you know, maybe we're looking at primarily lagging indicators, right? So we're always looking in the rear view mirror and we're not seeing the road in front of us and being able to identify some of those problems before they happen. So, you know, those are two things that I see.
Yeah, I really see the wrong measures and too many measures going hand in hand,
Yeah,
because too many are the wrong ones.
agreed.
And to your point, as organizations grow, you know, when you're first starting out, that person in charge of revenue, for example, may also be the marketing department and the sales closer, and may
Right.
just have one or two other people in there. So they're used to having that level of detail and numbers.
Yeah,
But you've got to let go, and as you build out your organization, get the numbers that are leading indicators and that roll up to the level where you are. It's a really important concept.
yes,
So to that point, let's take a look at something which is a little bit more detailed. We're going to add in one level of abstraction. Sorry if this is an eye chart, but in this, we start to add in some of the other disciplines that are underneath revenue operations and finance. And in this case, sales, marketing, customer service, logistics, engineering, production, accounting, administration, HR. So we have this next level. So much like the president was looking at, things so that that person could get an understanding of how revenue was functioning, how operations functioning, how finance was functioning. We're now having those folks that are in charge of those three areas be able to look down one level and see the numbers that are accretive to their number, which they are responsible for.
right.
So everybody likes numbers and revenue, so let's use those for the examples. You know, the president may not care about number of discovery calls booked or number of first time appointments booked by the marketing team, but the revenue person is going to care about that quite a bit. And then you have numbers within those areas. You know, the number of proposals generated in the and delivered in the last week is going to be really important, and that's a leading indicator. But that customer service net promoter score is going to be yet another type of metric and measure that's in there. So it can be a lot tougher with finance. We'll get to that in a minute. But you know, we're beginning to see how the president's able to hold accountability on the revenue team by understanding a few discrete numbers. The revenue leader is able to hold accountability for those those disciplines underneath them by having those specific numbers. So as we're going down that organization, we're getting that granularity. So, and we'll talk a lot about that in the end, but I do want to talk a little bit about finance. Because finance measures, remember, we're looking at things being weekly activity-based leading indicators. They have some ability to control it. Finance measures can be tough because finance so often works on a monthly cadence. But things like being up on your cash planning is a good measure. There are all kinds of good weekly measures around HR and administration as well. So again, revenue measures tend to be a little bit easier because of the nature of that discipline. But you still have to look at it across the board because we need to have things being numbers, as we had discussed last week. So getting back to the organizational management piece, do you find that, I mean, we like to think that we're evolved beyond the hierarchy. I don't see that as being true. I see it as being something which people would like to get to or aspire to, but I think that these things really represent how organizations naturally group themselves. So what are your thoughts on businesses as hierarchies?
So on hierarchies in general, or this?
Yeah, just in general. Yeah.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
I'm just saying, does this idea that, you know, that sales is junior to revenue is junior to senior leadership, like, does it naturally flow?
Yeah, I believe so. Yes, I'm not sure if I can add much more value, but yes, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, so the reason for that is that humans just naturally fall into hierarchies. And you know, we don't like it for a variety of reasons, and it may not seem fair or things like that. But they're just how we are wired. So we're going to organize ourselves into these types of ways. It's just inherent in how we behave as humans. So we're going to have to deal with it. So we should embrace it to the degree that we can and really be smart about how we have measures around it going up and down. You know, getting back to one of the main themes of this series of talks is that the balance between authority and responsibility. I hope that this org chart really illustrates that balance, how somebody in sales can have the responsibility for a number of proposals delivered, but they may not have the responsibility. They have the responsibility for it, but they may not have the authority to oversee EBITDA at the end of the quarter. It's just, so we can always, when we're looking at our organizations, we want to look at that balance between authority and responsibility. And we want to look at the type of measures we have and have them be commensurate with where they are in the hierarchy.
Yep.
Okay. So diving into that a little bit more, you know, the deeper you are in the organization, the more detailed. The higher up you are in senior leadership, the more generalized the measures and the numbers need to be. And so, you know, we were talking a little bit earlier, it's always easiest to go into revenue metrics because we're so driven by it. But in that organization that we had, the sales and marketing metrics are going to be far more detailed. You know, be it we talked about number of proposals, number of first-time meetings. In marketing, you know, it's above the funnel type metrics, number of emails that we've added to our email list. So those are far more concrete and far more detailed. Whereas that revenue number, may just be, booked revenue in the last week, or something which all of the other functions of sales, marketing, and customer service will roll up to it. But again, very important that we have the level of detail is commensurate with where it is in the organization.
As you bring that up, it's interesting, and I agree with you. How many metrics do you think are good to give to your marketing team?
So when it comes to marketing, first of all, you have to delineate you have, let's just think of it as the funnel, because everybody thinks of it as a funnel. Not everybody, but often. It's a commonly accepted concept. We have to first of all understand where the handoff is from marketing to sales.
Right.
So let's just call that the SQL line. So you have above the funnel, when that terminates down into a marketing qualified lead. And then you have some activities that get down to number of sales qualified leads.
Right.
So it's a set of numbers which help us to track things that go from, this is somebody that's in our ideal client profile, or within our service area, or whatever that happens to be that makes them above the funnel. A metric around that total audience, a metric around what's in the funnel, and that could be things committed into our CRM,
Right.
New prospects, new leads, whatever that happens to be. Then now that's in the funnel, we want to get it to being a marketing qualified, and that's how we done. You want to get to marketing qualified aspects, then to drive from the MQL world into the sales qualified world. It might be number of touches, it might be amount of content developed, but again, really simple numbers that we can see in the marketing space, above the funnel, in the funnel, graduating to a sales qualified lead. And
Right.
they may change over time, but when we do it right, we know that if we have this activity at the top of the funnel, we're going to get this activity in the middle of the funnel. We're going to get that activity at the sales qualified lead.
Right.
And that allows us to be predictable. It allows us to understand that things are moving forward, and they're all great leading indicators. We know that if we take 2 weeks off of converting people to marketing qualified leads, that in a month we're going to have a revenue problem.
Yeah.
And it's really something that shows. So again, it's the deeper you go, the more detailed they are. So we talked about measures that are activity-based, weekly, leading measures, things like that. I like to think about measures that move the needle. So what are some that you've encountered, Ken, that like when you look at them, you say, well, I can tell that this is going to move the needle on this organization?
For marketing specifically?
No, just in general, anywhere.
And move the needle. I mean, there's quite a few that can move the needle, right? So, and some of them are longer term, some are shorter term, but some longer term things that I like to have out there, both internally and externally, which takes time to build and get to, right? And I know I might not be giving you the answer you want, but it's the answer you get. are ENPS and NPS specifically. I don't think enough companies do that. It takes time, it's strategic, and it gives you insights directionally where you fit and sit with your client base, and directionally where you are with your employee base, right? And culturally, if you're declining, you'd have some indicators there. If there's problems with your clients, you'd have some indicators there. And the old rule of thumb, 80% of our business typically comes from 20% of our customers. And, and it's easier to sell to those that we know. So those were, if I had stayed, those would be the two that I'd say that, people should strongly consider.
Yeah, I like those quite a bit, and they do take some time, and they take a fair amount of orchestration to get to. So I like those. For me, I like to think about it, and I talk with my clients about, hey, let's create a set of machines that do the things that we need to do. So the marketing machine. Another might be, hey, our machine around getting inventory in, getting it picked and packed, staged, and put on trucks so that we can send it out to where it needs to go. As you build those machines, these are the basic processes which drive our organization. It's KPIing or having measures around those. So
Right.
what is the health of the machine now? And where can we incrementally get better? How can we make the machine get better? How can we convert more of our ICPs into MQLs? How can we have greater throughput and velocity on things as it goes through our warehouse? And so those are some of my favorites. Like, look for the machines that make the machines or the processes that make the business special, that they really rely on. Find the measures around them so you can really keep your finger on the pulse of the health of those machines.
Yep.
Good. So let's talk a little bit about using measures to solve problems. So we had talked about the measures that are at a high level, the senior leadership level.
Yep.
So simplest one, revenue is off. We're looking at closed business every week, and that has been lower than target for a couple of weeks. We know that we have a problem. There is a revenue problem there. It's less than we're expecting, and we can abstract from that what's going to happen in the future, and that's a leading indicator. But what it doesn't tell us is, why is that the problem? Like, right. Where is the problem? What is the issue? And so we want to go down to the measures underneath that to go and try to identify it and try to find the sort of, I call them the accretive measures that roll up to the larger measures. We can look at that and try to find what that issue is. In keeping with the example of, revenue goes down, where is it? Was it because 6 weeks ago we had a marketing problem? Is it because we have not been putting out proposals to the same degree, or whatever it happens to be? But as we so often see, when we have a problem, like one of these high-level senior leadership numbers is off, we can come up with, well, this is the problem, this is the issue, this is the solution. It helps to really have the numbers be the thing that tells you, because as you and I can know, when you state, all right, what's the problem? Well, revenue is off. Why is it off? The first thing that comes out is not going to be the reason.
Right.
It's going to be a symptom of the reason.
Yep, exactly.
And so you can always work to try to uncover the symptom of the reason, but the numbers will tell you where the issue is and where the challenge is. And then once we've identified that, we either see that, oh, we let those measures slip, or we weren't measuring that area adequately. We didn't fully appreciate how important that is for the organization. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to start measuring that thing. We're going to start saying, oh, we didn't put out enough proposals. Our proposals went down by half. Let's KPI that. Let's put measures around that number. Maybe it's not number of proposals. Maybe it's the quality of them. Maybe it's how quickly we can get them, because our potential clients are fickle, and if we don't get that proposal from concept to in front of them quickly, if it takes a month, that may be too long. So we're going to find out what the underlying root cause was, put some measures in place around it, so that instead of trying to deal with the symptom, we've diagnosed the cause, and we've put in a treatment which should make sure that issue, that problem, that challenge doesn't come up again. So, to that point, Ken, have you ever seen some measures that people have put in that was there specifically to diagnose and to deal with a problem or a challenge, and how it's overcome and worked through?
So do you mean, so the answer is yes, but what I'm trying to understand, are you asking the question, have I seen them do it and then it leads them down the wrong path unintentionally?
No, quite the opposite. It leads them on the right path. Like they saw it and they diagnosed it and said, oh, that was the issue.
Yeah, I think some of those are around the the NPS and everything and ENPS that I just discussed. I mean, those generally can give you really good insights into big issues that may not be on your radar, right? And help you get right to root cause. So that's one thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, I had one. This is a very, very low level tactical one, but it was really surprising, one that I encountered recently. The measure was on number of emails deployed to existing or prior customers, prior clients. And okay, here's my measure. This is what I want to hit. And boom, they're hitting the measure all the time, but they're not able to generate that repeat business that they're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you peel back the onion. What do you look? Nobody's opening the emails.
Yeah.
So the deployment was there, but the engagement was going down and down and down. And the engagement was going down to the same level, at the same level and the same rate as revenue from existing was. So what do you look for? Forget that the way we solved it, we actually deployed fewer, but we worked on content, we worked on the engagement, we worked on relevance of the messaging, we worked on subject lines, we worked on those things. We cleaned up the list. We got focused, we got targeted, and then we were able to measure the engagement numbers. And as that went up, so did the revenue. So an example of a really simple one, we were measuring the wrong thing. Even though we were hitting our measures, it wasn't helping the company. Very simple one, very easy. In retrospect, it seems pretty simple, but it took a little bit for that client to really fully appreciate that it's not the deployment, it's the engagement.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So moving on to homework. The first thing is everybody should take a look at their org chart. And the first thing to do is the org chart that you have really reflecting your organization? And if it's not, updated. So
what's a good indicator if you think to tell you that it's not, out of curiosity?
A couple of things. One is if you see an area that has a whole lot of people in it and other areas that don't, like why do we have a huge concentration of people in it? Now, maybe there could be a good reason. Okay. But it could be that your business has changed and evolved, and where you're deploying your human resources, your human capital hasn't evolved with the business. That can happen. Okay. Another is as you have people coming and going, maybe the box is still the same, but you have the wrong names in them. Another one, which is a really big pitfall, and it depends upon the size and complexity of your organization. But okay, you have one person's name in too many boxes.
That's fair. Yeah.
That could be another. So there's a variety of ways. So we so often are just used to our org chart. Hey, here's our org charts for onboarding. Here you go, have it.
Right.
Take the time to look at it. Really look over it. And is it really representing the organization? Is it representing the organization in terms of where you're deriving value from those areas, those aspects inside your organization? But really review it carefully and then update it. Then the next is use it and taking a look at your measures and KPIs. Like truly use it. Remember the balance of authority and responsibility, but understand that if you have senior leadership, they should not have detailed measures.
Right.
They just shouldn't have it. And if you're at the front line of the organization, don't have measures that are heavily strategic, because they don't have the authority to go and to move the needle on those things.
Right.
But they can be accretive. Their activities can be accretive to moving up. So a lot of times, setting measures and setting KPIs is harder than it looks. So one of the big tools, which is very much overlooked, is using your organizational chart to go through and say, okay, at what level is this function in the business? What is their level of authority and responsibility? And what are the measures above them in the organization, how do we make sure that their measures are accretive to the ones above them and above them as well? So it's a very, very useful it's a very, very useful tool in setting the measures that you have for all aspects in all areas of the business.
Okay.
So that's really what I wanted to talk about today. So just to sort of briefly summarize, it's a concept of, you need to use that organization, our org chart. We need to keep simple, powerful measures at the top that aren't too many of them, but are very descriptive and very much leading indicators. The next layer down, a little bit more detail and accretive to the higher measures. And then at the end of the org, we want to be able to, so as we're going down that organization, the more detailed the numbers, as we go up, the more general and directional the numbers. And then not forgetting that when we have challenges, issues, things that are not, the numbers are not good, the measures are not good at a higher level in the organization, we want to be able to go down the organization and find those other measures, those that are accretive to that one, so that we can understand what the true issue is. We can identify it, we can remediate it, and then we can put a measure in to make sure that that never happens. And then, of course, the last part is use your organizational chart to help you to develop measures right across the organization.
Cool. Awesome. What's next week?
So next week we'll be using accountabilities to delegate and to elevate. So how do we use accountabilities to bring people up in the organization so that we as senior leadership can free ourselves up to handle things that are more strategic? So we're going to use accountabilities to delegate and elevate so that we can work more on the business and less for the business.
Okay, awesome. I guarantee I'm going to have a lot of questions around that next week because, I'm sure you see, but that's one of the biggest problems I run into, right? Not understanding that concept, and so many, business owners and, sometimes newer leaders thinking that they need to do everything themselves, right?
Yeah.
And, I'm sure that we can share a lot of good war stories on that too, and how to address those. So looking forward to that. So
absolutely.
Cool. Awesome, Joshua. Well, this is very insightful as usual, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.